thank you. When we undertook this research, it was a combination of focus groups, one done in Phoenix with funders and one done in Tucson, and then some in-depth interviews via phone or in person with some key foundation leaders or executive directors. And out of that research, it was qualitative, so there aren't any numbers around how many are in these segments, but it became clear that there are basically 4 kinds of segments of funders that emerged from this research. The community-oriented, big-picture thinker funders, many of whom are in the room, even though you didn't participate in the research, you probably fall in this category, and that these folks are already supporting initiatives that understand that making change, helping older people is a community endeavor, because what's good for young people and middle-aged people and families is also good for older people and vice versa. The second group were those ready, willing, but not yet able funders. They're the ones who really expressed a desire to become more community-oriented, to look at the bigger picture, to engage older adults, to bring their talents and skills into the picture, and to collaborate with other funders who may come from the first group as leaders for initiatives, community initiatives, but really want to step up and expand their strategic horizons and their visions. The third group were those that said, if we fund 6 initiatives next year and they're all about aging, that's fine, and if they're none about aging, that's fine. What we choose are the very best plans, proposals, and models that come to our desk, and we fund until our money's gone. So they're the people who say, you find nonprofits need to step up and create the plan, create the model, and come to us with a compelling case to include aging in a bigger picture, or to focus on programs that will improve the life of people aging in our communities. But they said it must come from the grantee. So there's a real nice opportunity there for nonprofits to really understand they can have more influence on including aging initiatives into their plans. And then the last group were those, our priorities don't include older people, period. And they are the, one person very glibly said, an executive director of a big family foundation said that we have old white men on our board and they won't fund aging if it killed them, so that's it. And so we may as well understand that they're a segment that probably we couldn't move if we wanted to, and they're happy with what they're doing. And if they happen to touch the people who are aging, it's because a medical device was implanted in an older person, but it was actually intended to help a younger person. So they're fourth group. So the key findings were, it was an interesting dialogue, because we talked, I did some demographic exhibits about how really how small the component of the frail elderly are in the population of seniors, and how well educated upcoming seniors are, how capable they are, how much they really want to give back. They're not envelope stuffers anymore. They're people who have skills, and actually there's been some research that's demonstrated they can change the capacity, improve the capacity of nonprofits in marvelous ways. So I went through these exhibits and came up with the kind of my final conclusions are things like focus on the assets, skills, and talents of older people, not on the deficits and the disabilities, because that is a small portion, even though about 3% of our elders are truly frail, and that will stay probably a stable percentage, but the volume of that group will increase significantly with the population growth. Find ways to connect assets of older adults with community needs. One of the persons in category 4 said, you know, if someone came to me and said that this group I worked with could increase the capacity of serving children by 50 children a year because they had good volunteers, I might think about funding that. The point being, it wasn't about the value to the older person, it was about the value to the children. So that was a great finding. Education is really important in terms of grant makers and nonprofits alike, in terms of capitalizing on the assets of aging. Probably the most profound and interesting fact that people mentioned the most was that a greater and greater share of older Americans will be college graduates. And even the Educational Foundation said, this is interesting. So if we have more college-educated seniors who could help in our education systems, our kids, our teens, our youth at risk, they would be great role models. So they're starting to put those connections together. I heard earlier someone say something about innovation. One of the Family Foundation leaders said, there are so many needs of seniors that could be met in a social enterprise setting, and why don't we fund social enterprises that meet the needs of seniors? It could be nonprofits, it could be a for-profit business who's doing home care or whatever, or mechanical devices. It was clear that funders could benefit from adding an aging lens to what they already see or how they view the world. The clarity came when they said, but we can never veer from our original mission. Just help me understand how I can add an aging lens to what I do so I can tell my board that I'm still focused on youth at risk, or I'm focused on education of children. Another finding was the frame community building as a collaborative process to help people of all ages. Some of the people, in fact, most of the people we interviewed, and I didn't interview the design team in this room who were supporting this research, but they said, if you send me an email that has aging in the header, I delete it. So we have to find ways to build older adults and the productivity and the assets and talents and needs into a broader community model, and help funders meet their specific priorities, but make it a collaborative effort. So if there's a community effort, someone who says I want to fund aging, they could stand side by side with someone who funds children, who could actually they could cross-pollinate their assets and skills. And then last is really generate a collaborative model for a healthy community that engages all. We hear that everywhere, but that was real clear and went along with the finding, don't call this an aging initiative, I'll call this a community for all ages initiative or something similar.
Carol, maybe just to emphasize, I think, as I said, we ran 3 programs last year trying to educate funders, and a few showed up, not as many as we would have hoped for. But when we had the opportunity to sit down with them, walk through the information, it's kind of like they couldn't walk out of the room. They had to stare at these statistics. And, we had a few funders. One said, God, I'm mad at myself for not realizing how significant this is as an issue. So I think it's easy for funders who delete aging to not look at the data. And so the challenge is, how do I get before them?
Have any of you heard about, I'm sure you have, Community Ventures in California? That really is a wonderful organization, both for people transitioning to different
civic ventures.
Civic ventures. It's really very useful, and I don't, none of us who are of an age like to talk about seniors aging or whatever. My neighbor has a 92-year-old mother that didn't want to go to our local senior center because that's for old people. So language becomes a very difficult problem as we're dealing within communities. At the same time, to say you don't want to use the word aging is an escape. It's just like we're not going to use the word children and development as they grow. So we have to find some kind of compromise there and realize that different life experiences and timings in life have different foci.
Queuing off of your comment, I think to the person, all 30 of them were very interested in the statistics, and some of them said, I knew this, but I didn't really know it.
Yeah.
And it was an eye-opener. In fact, we got invited up to Flagstaff to do a presentation with the board, which we have to follow up on now this fall. So there is a real need out there to educate not only funders, but nonprofits about how to communicate with funders and how to build models. And hopefully out of your work will come the first model that came out of, that we were talking about in this research in terms of needing to step up and create initiatives. And there were several funders who really wanted to be invited by other funders to participate, but it has to be specific. You know, don't invite them to this generic planning model session. Invite them. In fact, one said, well, if Carol called me or Mary called me and said, you need to fund this, he said, I'd probably do that. So
Could you give us those names? We have an idea. Sounds like.
So in closing, I think this whole process is absolutely on the right track. When the model's developed, if funders will reach out to other funders and help them find a niche of what they can do that meets their vision and their mission, but also helps the greater community, I think you're just onto great things.